Okay, so imagine it's 1811. There's no Twitter, no 24-hour news. Your congressman is finishing his term, and to tell you what's going on, he sends you a letter. A really detailed, personal letter breaking down every major crisis facing the country. Well, that's exactly what we're digging into today. The final report from Congressman John Love, written at a moment when America was truly on the brink of war. Right from the start, Congressman Love sets this very serious tone. This isn't just an update, he calls it his last duty. You can just feel the weight of that. He has this deep, profound sense of obligation to make sure the folks who elected him know exactly where things stand. It's a pretty amazing example of the kind of direct accountability people expected back then.
So let's really try to put ourselves in their shoes for a minute. This letter shows up and the world feels incredibly unstable. You've got these two global superpowers, France and Britain, locked in a massive war. And America is just stuck right in the middle. What are the absolute burning issues your representative needs you to understand before he heads home? Well, let's find out.
The very first thing Love gets into is the crisis that's threatening to tear the young nation apart, the situation overseas. He lays out how America is caught in this vice grip between Great Britain and France. Our neutrality, our sovereignty, it was all being trampled on, day after day. And this wasn't just some one-off incident. It was a relentless economic slugfest. Just look at the timeline here, how fast it all escalated. Britain throws up a blockade, so Napoleon hits back. Britain doubles down, and France answers. Each one of these decrees was basically another nail in the coffin for American trade. It was strangling the nation's economy and making it pretty much impossible to legally trade with Europe. But as Congressman Love makes painfully clear, this wasn't just about ships and money. It was about people. He is just seething with outrage over the British practice of impressment, which meant boarding American ships and literally kidnapping American sailors, forcing them to serve in the Royal Navy. He calls them unfortunate fellow citizens dragged into captivity and wretchedness. I mean, this was a massive violation of everything America stood for. So Congress was completely trapped in what Love called an intolerable state of things. The choice was just awful. Option A, declare war on the most powerful navy on the planet, which could be total suicide. Or option B, inflict a massive wound on yourself. They chose option B, the embargo, a complete stop to all foreign trade. The hope, the gamble really, was that the economic pain would force Britain and France to finally respect American rights. It was the least evil of two terrible, terrible options. So why didn't this drastic plan work? Well, Love points to what was basically a perfect storm of problems. Here at home, you had a powerful mix of political opponents and merchants who were obviously losing a ton of money fighting it constantly. At the same time, the British were actively encouraging Americans to smuggle and break their own country's laws. The division at home just got so bad that the government had to give up on its only peaceful weapon. So after the embargo fell apart, they tried a weaker version called the Non-Intercourse Act. But Britain just didn't feel the pressure. In fact, Love tells this story about how a British minister actually signed a peace deal to fix things, but then the government back in London just said, nope, not happening, and refused the deal. This breach of faith, as Love calls it, left relations at an absolute rock bottom. But, the threats weren't all coming from overseas. While America was trying to fend off these global superpowers, an equally fierce battle was raging right here at home. And that brings us to the second huge issue Love explains to his constituents, the fight for the nation's financial future, all centered on the first bank of the United States. So what was this bank exactly? It's important to remember it wasn't a government agency like the Federal Reserve today. It was a private corporation that the government gave a 20-year charter to. It held all the government's money, it made loans, it was incredibly powerful. And in 1811, that 20-year charter was up, which forced this massive nationwide debate, should this thing be allowed to continue? Congressman Love was a hard no, and he lays out three main reasons for the people back home. First, he argued it was flat out unconstitutional, a monopoly that gave a private company powers the Constitution never gave the federal government. Second, and this was a really big one for him, was the massive foreign influence. And third, he saw it as an attack on states' rights, because the bank could just plop down a branch anywhere it wanted, even if a state said no thanks. And this chart really visualizes Love's biggest fear. In his letter, he reveals a pretty shocking fact. 70% of the bank's stock was owned by foreigners, most of them British. Just let that sink in for a second. The country is on a collision course with Great Britain, and its main financial institution is literally controlled by the other side. To Love, this was just an insane threat to national security. Now, the bank, for its part, was making a strong case for why it was needed. In its own petition to Congress, it argued that it had the power to balance the trade of the states, that it was a crucial, stabilizing force for the whole national economy. And right there, that's the heart of the problem for Love. When the bank says it can balance the trade, he sees a private company trying to take over a fundamental power of the government. That power, he insisted, belongs to Congress and to Congress alone. It didn't matter what the bank's intentions were, it was seizing a power that belonged to the people's elected representatives. And Love had a practical solution, too. He said, look, maybe this national bank was necessary back in the 1790s when the country was just getting started. But not anymore. By 1811, there were tons of state-chartered banks. He argued they were more than capable, and probably safer, to handle the government's money, which made the national bank not just dangerous, but obsolete. So, after laying out these two monumental challenges, the crisis with Britain and the fight over the bank, Love starts to wrap up his letter. He gives his constituents a broader summary of his time in Washington, kind of a final report card on his 4 years in office. He also wants to make sure people know that even with all these crises, the work of building the nation didn't just grind to a halt. He points out some key accomplishments: welcoming a new state into the Union, beefing up coastal defenses, planning for roads and canals, and trying to pursue a policy of peace with Native American tribes. It's this reminder that even under all that pressure, the government was still looking to the future. And he signs off not just as a policymaker, but as a neighbor. He expresses this really genuine regret about leaving the service of the people who put their trust in him. It's a great little window into the very personal nature of what it meant to be a representative back then. You know, this letter is so much more than just a historical document. It's a snapshot of the last few moments of a very fragile peace. The aggressions from Britain, the deep, bitter divisions at home over finance. These problems didn't just go away. Just 15 months after Love put this pen to paper, they exploded into the War of 1812. So knowing what he told his constituents, seeing the world through his eyes, how does that change your view of the massive conflict that was just around the corner?